So in terms of developing a really elite football athlete, there's a balance to be struck between pushing the training to a point where we improve performance, but also we need to find that balance of not pushing too far so that we're increasing injury risk. So everything we want to do, we're looking to increase performance, but we're also looking to boost injury resilience at the same time. So it's going to show you a very common movement that I want you to pay attention to when you're doing your gym training, especially your sort of strength-based training. And it's something called knee valgus, and this carries directly over to ACL injuries. Okay, so knee valgus is when the knees collapse inwards like this, and that basically puts a lot of force and strain on the ACL. And commonly when we see ACL injuries in sports in general, it's this position which has happened, which has caused the ACL injury. Okay, so things like if you're doing a squat, I just want you to always pay attention to where your knees are tracking, okay, when you're performing the squat. So if we're coming down, but we're coming down to squat like this, okay, that is knee valgus, the knees are dropping in. And female athletes are actually at greater risk than males because it's all to do with the angle of the hip down to the knee, and because generally females have wider hips than males, that angle is much greater down to the knee there. Okay, so females need to pay extra attention to this especially. So when we're coming down in that squat position, okay, try and make sure that you're tensing your glutes first of all, because that will help bring the knees out. And just make sure that you're trying to track your knees over the toes, okay, and not letting them drop in like this. And it's the same when you're landing. Also when you're doing a lunge, I commonly see players doing this. So you're obviously looking for the benefits of your squats and your lunges, but if we're doing it with poor form, we're actually increasing the injury risk. So when you lunge forwards, that knee is going to want to drop in, and so is the back one as well. So when you do your lunges, just pay extra attention to making sure that everything is aligned nicely so that you're getting the performance improvements, but also just making sure that you're being extra safe in terms of injury resilience as well. A common example, obviously when we're playing in a match, you're not going to be thinking this much about your movements. Nothing's going to be perfect, but in your training in a more controlled environment, you can definitely think about this, not only to make sure you're training safely and effectively, but also so that your body starts to remember these movement patterns so it then can mimic these out on the pitch. So if you're landing, for example, a common one that we'll see is you're coming up and you land like this. So imagine when you're landing from that height and there's lots of impact going through the joints, multiple times your body weight, and all of that is being absorbed by the joints, and you're putting that ACL again under massive stress because your knees are falling inwards there. So again, make sure that you're really tensing your glutes when you're practicing your landing. So you're going to come up and making sure, you might see a little wobble there as you land in slow motion. Just try and make that stick and make sure that these knees are driving more outwards over the toes. As well, so I want you to pay attention to the foot angle. So if the knees are fine, but the foot is coming out that way, like that, again, even though the knees aren't dropping inwards from the hip, that's going to increase your injury, your risk of injury. So as well, just making sure everything's pointing nicely forwards and aligned. Your toes can be sprayed a little bit outwards, that's fine. And then as you come down, really make sure that those knees aren't dropping in. A couple of things that can help you. Just grab my resistance band, my mini band. So you'll see some athletes using these. So you can just pop these around the top of the knees when you're performing exercises like squats. And when you come down, basically this is going to try and force your knees into the problem. And then that's going to force you to think about that and force your knees outwards. And that's going to help with glute activation as well. So you're going to come down, and this is trying to force my knees in, and I'm forcing them out. So it's making me focus on that movement, okay, and making sure the knees don't drop in there. Another thing you can do is, even if you can use a resistance band like this, we always want to pull into the problem. So just above the knee there, and even if it's just stepping out, so there's enough resistance on one foot. And again, you see here, my knee is wanting to collapse in like that. So just try and hold that nice and stable, activate the glute there, okay, and just try and keep that knee driving outwards. It's just another tip you can implement into your training. But the key ones are really when you're doing things like lunges, split squats, normal squats, pay extra attention to your movement quality, and then try and practice that in more dynamic movements such as jumping and landing. So even if I go from 1 to there, really solid there, don't let that come in. And again, the higher you jump, the higher you're landing from, the more force your body, your joints are having to cope with and having to absorb, so the greater risk of injury there. So just pay extra attention if you're going from a higher height when you're doing your landings, okay? Extra attention on your glutes, okay? And just holding that nice, solid position when you land. So try and implement this into any exercise which involves the knees sort of being tempted to come in. Really focus on forcing them out, and it's going to help you in terms of your injury prevention, injury resilience, and also movement efficiency as well.